which is to make Hillsborough County a safer and more pleasurable place to bicycle and walk. I'll thank Ben for the pizza tonight. And yeah, we're a few short of quorum, a couple might come in late, but it doesn't look like we'll get it tonight. So we'll start with just introductions for people that are here in person. So Delaney,
Elaine Watson, Hillsborough County Environmental Protection Group.
Tim Horst, City of Tampa rep.
David Ellsworth, citizen at large.
Ben Wood, PPO liaison.
You're going to the commission.
Dan Rodriguez, Hillsborough Regional Transit.
Brenton Mosher, USF Cutter, the alternate for Jason Jackman.
Yeah, thanks everyone for making it. And then, so let's move on to roll call. I think you're going to be doing the roll call now. So,
Yeah, that's right. Okay, David Ellsworth,
Present.
Tim Horst,
Right here.
John Kubicki. Sophia Garabino.
That way.
Christopher Miller. Yeah, Abigail Forbes. Stephen Sherman. Joe Yan. Elaine Watson.
Yes.
Brent Buffington.
Here, virtual.
Frank Buffington. Oh. Daniel Rodriguez.
Here.
Jason Jackson. Brent Marshall. Jonathan Forbes. Very sorry.
Oh, John.
Yes. Sally Thompson. Edward Newsom. David Slade. Jacob Royal.
Present virtually.
We do not have a quorum.
We'll do a sound check on the speakers because it looks like Jonathan's trying to talk, but we're not hearing. So Chris, spell our options. I didn't see, did you see Jonathan pop in? Did mention, people do have stuff like TV.
I called you. That was like yesterday.
Oh, this was like 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna message you.
Perfect. Okay, you're done with vote.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, we're one short of quorum, but yeah, we'll move on now to public comments. So, did we really do a sound check? Is that what you're? What's? Jonathan, or could someone online say hi?
Hello.
This is Jonathan Forbes. I think we just lost sound, but I think we're back now.
Okay, so yeah, we're in public comment. Was there anyone present? Has anyone online wanted to make a public comment? And it's great. All right, being none, we'll move on to members' interest and future topic requests. So, do we have any, Brandon?
Yes, I was told to bring up, I believe it's been distributed. USF Center for Urban Transportation Research is conducting a study of bike and rail connectivity throughout Florida. And so they partnered with Bike Florida to offer a nice little incentive, but we just need feedback on the survey. So we get it distributed, and also it's on the Cutter Facebook page and other areas.
Was that in tonight's agenda package? You say it's been distributed, it was distributed to the TPO.
I don't know if it was distributed to the TPO, but someone at the MPO got it.
I haven't seen it, so perhaps it should be added to the minutes for next month.
Yeah.
Or just distribute it, you can just forward it. All right. Thanks, Brandon. Any other member interest or future topic requests? Any online? Okay, so next would be approval minutes, but we don't have a form. So we will move on to action items. So first up is Elizabeth Watkins with the FY 2630 tip.
Good evening, BPAC, Elizabeth Watkins, TPO staff. This is supposed to be in this meeting. Apologies for the technical. We're in the room. Very good evening. I'm here today to brief you on the annual update of the Transportation Improvement Program. So I'll start with a little bit of background before diving into the projects that are listed and the thing we call affectionately the TIP. So what is it? The TIP is a list of federally funded and regionally significant projects that are programmed to advance in the next 5 years. So that could be a project that maybe needs to get started with a planning study, or maybe it needs funding for right of way. Anything that's going to advance at some point in the project development process and use federal funds must be in the Transportation Improvement Program. So why do we do this? Well, we're required by federal and even state statutes to maintain the TIP. And really the importance of it kind of goes back to the history of MPOs, where it's supposed to be the local voice in the federal transportation decision-making process. So by having the standalone document that summarizes the projects that are federally funded, it brings enhanced visibility to those. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship between the FDOT work program and then the TPO's TIP. So DOT's work program is just like it sounds. It's what the department intends to work on over the next 5 years. And it's a big document, lots of projects. It includes state funded projects as well as federally funded projects. So the TPO's TIP is really just a subset of all of those federally funded projects in DOT's work program, and then repackaged for the MPO. And while it is the DOT work program, there are City of Tampa projects in there. Of course, there are SMART projects in there. So anything that is federally funded in Hillsborough County, this transportation must be in the TIP. There are a variety of requirements that MPOs must follow to adopt this annually. First and foremost is opportunities for the public to weigh in and to comment. So we do a variety of methods, not just coming through TPO committees. We put up signs on projects that are advancing to construction. We send postcards, we do social media, lots of different ways to raise awareness about these projects. Of course, we work really closely with FDOT and HART as they are the two main entities that federal funds flow to in Hillsborough County. All projects within the TIP must be consistent with our long-range transportation plan. And this is not a wish list. The TIP is a summary of projects that actively have funding on them. So it has to be very realistic based on the revenues that are available. So we're kind of at the end of the project programming process. It's very much iterative, but where we start off was winter of 2023, where the TPO worked with local governments to identify which projects they might want to advance and compete for federal funds on. Then we took those applications last summer, and put them on a priority list where our TPO board took action and in a ranked order identified which projects are their priorities. From there, it moves into the tentative work program, which is distributed every winter as the tentative work program. And then really the last stop is the TIP. So we're very much at the end of the process here. And you'll see in my next presentation where we'll earlier on where the board will consider the priority list. How do projects even get into the TIP? Well, a subset of those projects come from the TPO's priority list, which comes from our local government partners and which ones they see that they want to use federal funds on. But the vast majority of the TIP, which is over $2.5 billion, comes from DOT's priority projects and programs, whether that's projects on the strategic intermodal system, other priorities that they have on the state highway system. Really the lion's share comes from District 7. And then, of course, there has to be funding in the TIP to operate and maintain. So lots of funding for resurfacing and replacing buses and just keeping our system in a state of repair. So now I'll get into projects that make up the TIP. So there are over 180 projects that are programmed to advance over the next 5 years, totaling over $2.5 billion. And when you look at the mode split, the vast majority are highway, so about $1.5 billion goes to that. When we call it highway, we don't mean just interstates and roads, sidewalks, trails, signals, all of those things fall traditionally under the highway program. Then the next largest category is transit with about 439 million program.
I have a question. Of that 2.5 billion, do you know how much is federal money versus state money?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but DOT prides themselves in that they have more state funds than federal. So I can get you that specific number, but if I were to guess, I would probably say 40 federal, 60 state. And then some of this funding also goes to support the port, the airport, and freight operations. So we look at the TIP by just a distinct project and by our LRTP categories. So just as a reminder, smart cities, things with signals, intersections, the repair resilience, those are resurfacing, bridge maintenance, transit fleet replacements. Vision Zero is anything with just safety components. So whether it's sidewalks or pedestrian mid-block crossings as the primary work type. Real choices are local transit service and trails. And then our major projects we define as widenings, intersection improvements, and then fixed skyway transit. So when you take a look at the TIP through this lens, the lion's share of the projects are to maintain the system in a state of good repair. There's over 90 projects and then fewer in the other categories. And we would expect to see that given that we have a lot of lane miles, a lot of existing facilities that need to be maintained. So when you look at the TIP from just a funding perspective, you see the lion's share there, almost 50% goes towards those major projects, those capacity projects. And we would expect to see that because those are higher dollar amounts, like West Shore Interchange, for example. That's a $400 million project. There are going to be fewer projects, but they're going to take up a larger share of the pie. But when you look even further into the TIP financials and we look just at those pots of funding that the TPO has programming authority over, the majority of the funding goes to safety projects, maintaining our system in good repair, and then a lesser amount to smart cities, real choices. So this pot of funding is much smaller than that $2.5 billion. It's like $100 million, so it's just a small fraction of it. But this is where we can make the most immediate difference because the TPO board has primary discretion over those funds. So I'm not gonna read 200 projects to you, but I would invite you, if you're interested, to use your phone. You can scan this QR code where you can see a map of all those projects. We have them broken out by the TP categories. About this might be a more effective way to convey the tip than just spit a lot of details at you. I still will spit a lot of details at you, but this is another way that maybe you can find what you're most interested in. So I'll go over a couple projects by general categories. So first, taking a look at limited access capacity projects. There are 2 projects on I-275 that we expect to continue in advance over the next 5 years. The first of which being I-275 from north of Lowest to north of Howard. That's also known as Section 5 of TVNX for those of you who've been around for a while. A little bit of right-of-way is programmed in fiscal year 30. But construction still remains unfunded, and the current estimate is about $275 million for that. I mentioned West Shore Interchange earlier. That project will be in construction over the life of this TIP. FDOT expects early works on those side streets to start later this year, with the major works of the main line and the express lanes to really start in earnest in 2026. There are a few auxiliary lanes on I-4, mostly in the eastern part of the county. So the first of which is west of Bethlehem to west of Bridge Fords Road. Construction is programmed in 2028 to implement that auxiliary lane just to help facilitate the movement of traffic between exits on I-4. And the second auxiliary lane project is in Plant City from Way Station to McIntosh Road. And construction is programmed for that in 2020. The Turnpike Enterprise continues to advance the South Coast Parkway extension, are widening from 4 to 8 lanes between Van Dyke and Loops Lake Fern Road. They're wrapping up PD&E this year, but they have plans to move through design very quickly and then to right away within the tech. A few other capacity projects. Most of these are focused in the eastern part of the county, as well as near Palm River, near the port. You can see MLK will be widened from 2 to 4 lanes from Kingsway to McIntosh. State Route 60 from Valrico to Dover, that will be widened from 4 to 6 lanes. And then US 41 from Dover to Austin, 4 to 6 lanes. Those 2 projects in particular are fulfilling a really important and longstanding freight need. To have an overpass over the CXX lines and enhance the movement of freight traffic. So the things the BPAC probably is the most interested in. I'll spend a little more time talking about these. The first of which is the South Coast Greenway. DOT, in partnership with Hillsborough County, is going to build a pedestrian overpass over Big Bend Road from Waterset to Covington Gardens, close to East Bay High School. So that will be an important connection to get over that big arterial road. The city of Tampa received some SunTrail funding to implement the South Tampa Greenway. That's programmed for construction in fiscal year 30 near McDill. The Tampa Bypass Canal from Morris Bridge to Bruce B. Downs, that has some design funding programmed in fiscal year 27. So looking forward to seeing that project advance. Then along Fowler, there will be a side path or an enhanced sidewalk installed between 56 to east of I-75. And then there are a variety of sidewalk projects, 2 near some middle schools in Plant City, and then State Route 39 and US 301 in Plant City in the eastern part of the county. From a safety perspective or an urban corridor improvement, one project the TPO is very excited to see moving to construction over the next couple of years is Bush Boulevard from North Del Mabry to North Nebraska. There will be a variety of improvements, including adding medians, pedestrian refuges, filling sidewalk gaps where they can. There will be a sidewalk on both sides of Bush between these limits. There is a segment from like Armenia to Oakleaf that has some really has some challenges to filling those gaps due to property purchasing and utilities. So it won't be completely filled, but DOT is doing the best they can. Some additional improvements for safety is to narrow the lanes, and then the speed limit will be reduced to 35 miles per hour. Along Fowler, there's some safety improvements planned. Those limits are between Florida, so just west of I-275 to west of 56. They'll be widening the sidewalks, adding some hawk signals, very similar to what's on Bush Boulevard today, and then some intersection improvements to enhance pedestrian safety on that high speed. And then finally, a pedestrian signal will be installed in Temple Terrace at 56th and Sawaha Road. Now looking at the transit projects, the Tico streetcar extension continues to be in the transportation improvement program. You may recall that the city won a really big small starts grant from FTA, and DOT is helping match that with some of their discretionary transit funding. So that funding remains available for that project. FDOT continues to support BART and operations of routes 34 and 400. So that's the route on Hillsborough and then Nebraska. Those are state routes, so there's a good partnership there. The heavy maintenance facility, which Dan is very familiar with, that continues to be in the tip, and Hertz doing an amazing job of getting every dollar they can for that extremely important project. The TPO has had a longstanding commitment to HART to give them some highway funding every year to help support bus replacements, as well as rehabilitate their nearly 3,000 bus stops throughout the county. So it's not going to fix everything overnight, but there's a really great partnership that's been longstanding. And then there's a variety of signal upgrades going on throughout the county. I think one of the more interesting ones is along US 41. So near Sulphur Springs all the way up to Lutz. Some big investments going on in upgrading the technology and hardware along that corridor to rehabilitate those signals. I know that was a lot, but I'll just recap with kind of where we are, where we're going. We are continuing to move through all the TPO committee presentations. The draft tip and priority list was in your packet. We've mailed the flyers, posted road signs, and continue to seek public input. And the board will consider adopting the tip at their June 11th hearing. So the recommended action for you all today is to consider recommending the Transportation Improvement Program to the TPO board. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question, Abigail Larson is recommending. Can you go back to that slide with, show the breakdown of the funding by chart? What's the real choices and the non-infrastructure type projects, like examples?
Absolutely. So real choices are local bus service. So let's say, HART receives 5307 funding to support their operations. So that would go under real choices, as well as any funding for side paths. So that Fowler side path, that would be categorized under real choices. The miscellaneous ones are more of those non-infrastructure projects that have to be in the TIP. So a couple examples come to mind. The HVAC update of the District 7's office, or the vacuum refurbishment at the airport. Those are things we didn't feel were surface transportation related and kind of should be kept separate.
And then what's the step? So these projects are in different phases. What's the current phase of that head overpass over Big Bend that you mentioned?
I believe that construction is programmed in 29. And fiscal year 29 is when construction is programmed.
So it's in design or still a project development?
Yes.
The district's running the design.
Okay.
I just want to say, I've been here for a few years and it's the first time I realized that the TIP only included projects that were federally funded or had a federal dollar string attached to them. I thought it was just more broad and general as far as the project, so it is interesting. I just want to say thank you for that helpful clarification up front. As far as what's happening.
Thank you for calling that out, Tim. And one thing I failed to mention at the beginning, but we are trying something new this year where we used to put together a priority list with the TIP, but they're two very separate things. So that's why we're having two separate presentations. But all of this has to have that federal nexus like we're talking about.
So the priority list, any local agency can apply to that or?
Yes.
And it's annual.
Annually, yep. And that'll be the next presentation, so we can talk a little bit more about that.
There's Andrews. There's Andrews. Yeah.
Yes, JH has it there.
That's thanks.
Jensen, you have a question?
Yeah, this is Jensen Hackett from FDOT. Just a quick clarification. I think Tim is the one who asked earlier, but the share of dollars from state versus federal for FDOT is actually closer to a 75-25 split state to fed. Just an FYI.
That's it.
There's a couple of federal grants that the city won. Were those represented in the TIP?
Yes, absolutely. So the one in Palmetto Beach, that's really exciting. That's in the TIP. I should have called that out. That's a really exciting project. New York State Seats for All are also in there. Same
those
thing,
grants,
they're listed.
yeah. But yeah, all of the resurfacing that we do, just as like general maintenance, isn't in there.
No,
Yeah.
no. We try to capture that with our long range plan to get like a real big picture of what the locals are spending, what DOT's spending.
Yeah.
But when we look at the TIP, we're really just looking at what's in DOT's work program. That's federally funded.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think that you're requesting a
Yes.
motion.
Yes, and we
We
do
do have
have
no forum now, so I'm happy to entertain a motion for this recommendation.
I'll do a motion, that motion that we approve the recommendation to the TPO board.
Second.
Tim Horst and made the motion, Dan Rodriguez second. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I guess you lead us into the next one. I mean, yeah, I'm interested to hear how the priority list and how it's.
Exactly.
I was gonna do an old business. Yeah. Okay.
Was it people? Okay.
No, sorry, please.
So this presentation will be focusing just on the priority list. So for those of you long timers, this was the former table 1 and table 2. We thought for clarity, we're going to try something different this year and break them since they are distinct products. This was a minor change that we made, but you can see the years that this covers is one past the TIP. So the TIP was from fiscal years 26 to 30. This priority list will inform the next TIP and the next work program, which covers fiscal years 27 and 31. So what exactly is the priority list? Well, it's a lot like it sounds. It's a ranked list of projects that the TPO board adopts. The projects are at various stages of project development in the priority list. Many are pre-construction, so maybe they need a PD&E, maybe they need design. And then there are some that actively have construction funding programmed to them, but in a later year. And we keep those on the priority list because we know costs have been escalating and things happen. So we like to keep them on that priority list in case there are overruns and to continue to communicate to DOT that these are a priority and we want to see them to the finish line. So how exactly is this list used? Well, first and foremost, it's used to prioritize projects for the pots of funding that the TPO has primary authority over. So if you can recall that pie chart I showed earlier, where most of that money has been going to Vision Zero projects. It's not a whole lot of money, but it's not nothing. It's about $15 to $25 million per year, depending on a variety of factors such as projects that have already started, where they are in the process and how much new money is available. But on average, we can expect, $15 to $25 million a year to program to priorities. Another way that the priority list is used is one way to communicate to DOT if there are needs on their facilities. I know there are a lot of state highways that go within city boundaries, unincorporated, that are heart routes. So this is another way to tell DOT, hey, we would like you to consider this project, whether that's a new project or to leverage an existing project they have on the books to incorporate other elements. And then finally, it can be used as a method to just show community support. So there are a lot of discretionary grants out there, and often our partners will submit the priority list as supplemental documentation to say, hey, feds, we already have this approved. There is consensus that this is a project that the community supports. So this graphic will look familiar to you. We are earlier in the process than we are with the TIP. So just this past spring and winter, we received applications from our local government partners and evaluate all of the projects and then propose a priority list for the TPO board to take action. So this is a partnership. So local agencies play a really important role because they're the ones that know their facilities best. Therefore, all of the projects are sourced from their applications. They're the ones that have to operate and maintain it, so the project needs must come from them. And ultimately, they will likely be the ones who implement the project if they're lab certified or work closely with DOT to see the project. The TPO serves the role of evaluating those priorities and evaluating the projects, ranking them. And really the TPO board helps set that long-term vision through our LRTP that informs the TIP and the priority list. And we use a data-driven process to not only evaluate the outcomes or the intended outcomes of the projects, but we have a robust performance measures program to monitor the investment of those dollars. And DOT plays an extremely important role as they are the ultimate authority in programming the dollars. All federal funds go through state DOTs, so DOT takes that responsibility very seriously, not only in the budgeting and programming process, but they're also responsible for oversight of those federally funded projects. So I kind of already talked through the process of how they're ranked, where the projects come from. But I guess one thing I'll emphasize here is that the way that our methodology is we really try to compare apples to apples. So we have a different set of performance criteria based on that LRTP category, because it would be unfair to judge a sidewalk project against an interchange project. So for example, for Vision Zero projects, we look at fatal and serious injury crashes to ensure that the projects that we're recommending in our higher priority are that there is a demonstrated need there, and that the projects that have had a lot of incidences that they're near the top. We want to get dollars on those projects as soon as possible. So it's very much a data-driven process, but this year there was a bit of a policy decision that also influenced the rankings. So at last year's priority list hearing, the TPO board directed the staff to follow the Citizens Advisories Committee ranking to move the streetcar extension, downtown to airport transit, and Brightline multimodal connections to the top of their respective categories. So we did our data-driven analysis, but we moved those 3 projects up to their top of the categories based on the TPO board's direction. So now we'll get into some of the projects. So here's a map of them. You can see that there are a variety of project types. They touch all corners of the county and municipalities. There are 73 projects on that priority list, but only 18% of them, those 16 I mentioned earlier, are ones that are actively seeking funding for fiscal year 3020. So that's another thing that plays into agencies' calculus. If there's a problem tomorrow, like a big sinkhole in a road, you're not going to come to the TPO or FDOT for funding because you can't wait 6 years. So one of the strategic aspects of our partners thinking about this source of funds are, what are those projects that are worth federalizing and that can wait a little bit because the funding will be available for another 5 to 6 years. So here's a summary of those projects that submitted applications. So Smart Cities, City of Temple Terrace submitted a request for funding to implement a signal and some intersection improvements at 56th and Druid Hills. HART submitted a variety of projects under our State of Good Repair and Resilience category. I mentioned earlier the bus replacements and the bus stop capital repairs, as well as their heavy maintenance facility. In our Vision Zero category, the City of Tampa submitted an application to implement sidewalks and some intersection improvements, and then I believe a center turn lane for the Hannah Avenue traffic calming project. Then again, in Temple Terrace, requesting pedestrian signal and some safety improvements along 56 at 113th, which is just south of Fowler. And wrapping up the Vision Zero category is Collins Street, Complete Street. Collins Street is a really important corridor in Plant City where the city expects there to be a lot of development. So wanting to ensure that the streetscape is walkable, that is compatible with that vision. And wrapping out our 2 last categories, a variety of trails was submitted by Hillsborough County to advance South Coast Greenway Phase 3, the Upper Tampa Bay Trail Phase 6, and the Tampa Bay Canal Segment 6. And then finally was our major investments for economic growth. These are the widenings and the Big Skyway. We have typically run out of money before we get to these major projects, but for Solidarity, the Hearts projects, their main BRT project along Florida Tampa connecting downtown to USF, they submitted a request for funding there. And then 2 widenings from the county in South County at Gibsonton Drive and Fall Road. So I mentioned earlier that there are some other projects that are priorities, but they have construction funding. So we're just waiting for those to reach that year when those dollars will be made available to them. And there's about 50 of them on the priority list in a separate section. Just wanted to call out a few of these for you. So I mentioned this earlier, but a variety of projects are happening along Causeway and US 41. That grade separation to go over the CSX tracks is a really important project that finally got some construction dollars in fiscal year 30. It will also include a side street and then a trail to facilitate non-motorized transportation. So we're really excited to see that this project finally got some construction funding. I think it was over $100 million. I mentioned earlier in the TIP presentation that there is new funding for the pedestrian signal at 56 and Waha Road. This is an important crossing. This is near one of Temple Terrace's shopping centers where there have been some crashes. So we're hopeful that this new signal will help mitigate those. And then I mentioned in the TIP, but want to reiterate here because it is a TPO priority, but finishing some of the connections of the South Tampa Greenway that has construction funding in fiscal year 30. So to close out this presentation, I wanted to highlight a few projects that finally got built. because we all know things take decades to complete, just given the scale and cost. So the Howard Franklin Bridge just opened this year for in the general use lanes for the other bridge that was built. Later this summer, the express lanes will open up, and then in spring of 2026, that shared use pathway will be open for bikers and walkers. So that's a big success that opened in March. Some intersection improvements in the West Shore area of Boy Scout Boulevard in Manhattan. Some restriping, a new signal, crosswalks, and some refuges were installed. So we were really happy to see that those investments made. Additionally, along Nebraska Avenue, which has been a priority for the TPO for decades, we had a relane configuration, maybe 10 years ago, but most recently in March, a variety of pedestrian upgrades were made. So those look great. These opened again, in March. So there's different hawk signals, medians, and other pedestrian refuges all along Nebraska from close to downtown up to St. Louis. And then finally, in the eastern portion of the county, there are some new signals that were installed along US 301 at Harney, Stacy, and McIntosh. So there's new signals, crosswalks, as well as a connection to the Fort King Trail out in that portion of the county. So this next steps are very similar to the TIP. This will go to the TPO board for consideration at their June hearing, and then DOT will use this priority list as they make funding decisions for the next year. So the recommended action for you to consider today is to recommend that the TPO board approve this priority list. And I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions?
So there's, said $15 to $20 million per year available for pretty much all of the transportation players in the county to apply for, right? And then it's awarded based off of the TPO board picks and chooses the list, or how do they pick, like, you give them the short list of these the best ones and they pick, like, vote on it? I'm just curious how that decisions are made.
So we receive those applications and then we use different evaluation criteria. So for those smart cities projects, that's the top priority for the TPO board right now. So we compare all those projects based on their travel time index as well as their delay. So staff uses a data-driven process to kind of rank comparable projects against each other. And then that analysis goes before the TPO board for their consideration. Often they will move around projects, but that's kind of how the sausage is made.
Okay. Do they give you like a percentage that they want to spend on each category?
They haven't, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I saw what it was previously of like 60% Division 0. I'm kind of just curious, like what, their attention is, I guess.
Yeah, there hasn't been a policy that way, but I think that would make a lot of sense because often what we'll see is,
Like if they say we want to fund smart cities, but there's like one smart cities application.
right,
It's like, well, you can't based off of what the applications we got.
right, exactly. So there's a million ways to do this. That's currently how it's done here. So we would just go from 1 to 73, what project has an application on it, and then DOT would make that decision based on how much funding is available. So typically, like, usually don't get past Division 0. The dollars typically run out by then.
Oh, as far as we're gonna fund it in this order is kind of like, that's how they would say, well, we're gonna move from left to right funding as many things as we can, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
I didn't want to throw 73 projects at you, but in your packet, there is a ranked list from 1 to
And
7
there's actually 73, but those are just like the top ones that you're,
and have applications on them. So if the local government didn't submit an application, then it can't be funded. That's just a business rule that DOT requires.
okay. So projects that are on the priority list but aren't submitted, I guess that'd be a good project to submit for then, I guess, if you're, I'm just thinking like for, the city of Tampa, like what we would do.
Right. A little tired, I'm gonna say this anyways, I feel like the city does a really great job in gaming this process, so the Hannah Avenue traffic calming, they only ask for construction funding, so, and it's a smaller dollar amount, I think the request was maybe $3 million. So knowing which projects you wanna federalize, having the early phases of project development done, that makes it like a home run often to get funding, so
Yeah,
it can be gamed in.
you're right, that is the thing too. Are they requesting design and construction or just construction? Yeah.
I like.
Yeah, I think you already answered my question was that you said the full list is in the agenda package, but where else can you find the full list? Online, can they?
Yep, it's on the website, and we've posted signs with QR codes, we have mailed postcards to, property owners that, live within a certain distance of projects that are being advanced for construction. So there are a number of ways that we try to get the word out on this.
I had a question. So for the 27 to 31, the local agencies can continue to submit applications up to 2026, or since this is 2027, they just continue to put applications in.
So we do an annual call for projects every year, and the rule is that that is usually competing for funding in the next fifth year of work program. So the applications that were just submitted will likely be funded hopefully in fiscal year 31. There have been occasions where DOT is like, oh, wait, we've got some earlier money and you can get something funded earlier. But the rule is the projects that were submitted for this year are really competing for funding to be programmed in fiscal year 31.
I have a question, follow on to Tim's. I don't understand, I understand how you rank products or projects within a category. But he was also asking about how do we rank between categories, which I think you say you do. And it's not based on percentage, but you have this process that assigns scores regardless of, so that you can compare projects in two different categories. Am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. So to give you a concrete example, right now on the list, I believe priorities 1 through 7, those are all of our smart cities. So they're at the very top of our list. Then the next priority is.
And can I interrupt you there, because they became 1 through 7 because your scoring system put them at the top, or because the TPO says, no, that's our number one priority?
The TPO board made that decision based on the most recent long-range plan,
Okay.
where it showed that the community and then the TPO board's priorities, that we wanted to focus our efforts on smart cities.
Okay, yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Answer my
please
question
don't.
by that.
You're right.
That's what I'm trying to understand. So, okay, so they are, even though it's not fixed percentages like Tim proposed, it's that they are kind of saying these are, so when you say we run out of money before we get to this, it's because they prioritize projects, and the applications, fill those up. It's not, okay, okay, no, understood me.
John, what's the split between the number of applicants you have in funding? How much funding requests did you get this year versus how much you actually have?
I believe that number was probably about $100 million. So there's more needs than there are revenues. Way more needs.
So. Okay, yes, you're funding, what, 20% of the applications, okay. Thank you. And then just so I'm clear on what the ask is, because you're not presenting, you're not asking us what our big projects are, you're saying, you're asking this group to, agree that you've done the diligence and we're happy with the results, right? We're not really influencing it,
That's the expected action. Most TPO committees kind of take staff's recommendation. Our citizens advisory committee will often go around and make motions about moving projects up or down. So you certainly could look at those projects and recommend changes, but the TPO board may consider. So it's really at the,
We could say, hey, we really want you to fund the Tampa bypass canal or some other trail project the county is doing, and make a motion to the TPO board, and they can they'll get it in their agenda or they'll get it in some kind of. I'm just wondering, like, how do they see the motions that we pass and like,
So our,
you know, the CAC, they go to those meetings and like the chair is like, so at our meeting, we had a motion that recommended this. What are you gonna do about it kind of thing?
Yeah.
That's what I've heard that they do. It's
Yeah.
that's why they've been effective in their advocacy.
yeah, that's definitely one way that they've chosen to handle it. So sorry, I had a question, I just lost it.
So we pass a motion here.
Yeah.
How does the TPO board
Yes.
get that communicated to them?
Our public engagement officer will recap on what the CAC, what all the committees recommended. So if you were to make a specific motion, that's how it would get, passed to the TPO board from her. And then I will honestly probably have a slide in my final presentation, just providing information to them of what the advisory committees recommended, or what motions they made.
So we could say, hey, can we make a motion, or I would like to make a motion to prioritize, say, parts, downtown to USF BRT project. Right, and then, you know, that's what I would offer up to.
But it sounds like you could recommend to either add something completely new to the list or move something up or down.
Yeah, right, so it's like, okay, it's
Specific, a specific, position, probably,
yeah.
easier to communicate. Or hope to get action.
All right, so yeah, I'll make the motion to prioritize the Hearts BRT Tampa to downtown Tampa to USF BRT project for TPO funds. Do I have a second?
Okay, yeah, this is motion for 10, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Okay. Is this motion just about adding, changing that? Or is that about also reporting the whole thing? We have a motion to recommend approval with the
Oh, this is
suggestion
separate,
of
this is separate from that.
separate.
Question, so, I'm looking at the list,
Yes, sir.
yeah, so you're wanting to move ranking from where it's at, trying to found it, up to a higher number, or actually a lower number, a higher rank.
Yeah, to move that project particularly to a higher priorities.
So I have a question about the, again, about the list, so, scroll through the list, down the, top of the list are the whole category of smart cities. And then followed by the next category is, good repair, so starting with, it's like number 2. So all the smart cities, where this list is recommending to the TPO that, hey, fund all the smart cities first, and then fund all the good repair, and then fund all the. And,
That's the priority set by the TPO board. And we could say, use our voice here to say, would rather see funding towards a transit project. For instance, because, I also have the opinion that, Billborough County has lagged in a lot of ways when it comes to significant transit projects. And I think elevating that is a word motion.
When does this go before the next board meeting? It's just, there's a lot of projects, it's hard to digest.
Well, okay, so there's a motion that's been seconded. Is there any other discussion?
I'd like a little clarity. Are we just saying move it up, generally speaking, or are we saying move it to a specific position?
Motion was to prioritize the funding.
But it's on that communication, something that's already actionable.
I can offer a recommendation.
Yeah.
The longstanding process and adopted methodology is if you wanted to move the arterial BRT from its current position to the top of major projects, that would be the way that I would make that recommendation.
You know what number is on the list?
I don't, but it will be in the green section under major projects, since it's the
Number
guideline.
48, and it is. Fifth one down. Top of that account.
So did you go with this?
Right, so it would be moving from 48 to 44,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yes.
That's an important piece of information that might be helpful to you. I think they requested $60 million. So it would take the whole budget. Sure, just for your information.
You can't like say, oh, we'll give them 30 million and then, I'm sure they could, right?
Yeah, that's what they requested.
Right, yeah, so it's like, they can be like, okay, we'll give them some of that, right? But I mean, we'll leave that to however that process goes, but yeah, I guess you said it'd be better worded to revise the motion to prioritize, I'm sorry,
Yeah, to move up the Tampa arterial BRT to the top of major projects.
okay. But, I mean, I would recommend it more than just moving to the top of that bucket, but also to advance it in priority in general, because currently major projects is at the bottom, on the lowest priority. So,
Which I already.
I'll just say, yeah, I think the motion as stated was, which I'll say again, that I motion that we prioritize funding of the Tampa BRT route from downtown Tampa to USF for TPO funding. Dan, would you select second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, is there any other discussion?
Well, but yeah, I'm just gonna say you're doing it at the expense of all other modules. There are very good and worthy projects by another Vision Zero projects. They're project responsive.
I suppose I would be. Yeah, I guess, I feel like the need and desire of mine for any high quality transit service with dedicated space, you know, to me feels like, you know, that is warranted given the funding that transit has had in the past. I feel like we made a lot of good progress when it comes to safety, when it comes to, you know, FDOT's adoption of target zero. I've seen some good progress there, but I'd like to see good progress as it relates to, you know, quality transit, so. Chris?
I just, but as I heard the phrasing of the motion, it is just to prioritize it for funding. So that means just find some money without specifying the position on the list.
The TPO funding, the funding that the TPO has at their discretion.
So clearly actionable.
I mean, I think the TPO board could take that and then they could choose which position. I think likely what they'll do if they adopt that motion is they'll move it to the top of major projects, just given that that's the longstanding adopted methodology, but we'll defer to you all on my vote.
It just states the process is to create a priority list, not funding.
Right.
So, but this is the priority list that's gonna be used when funding priority decisions are made, and those are gonna be, again, reviewed at that time. Right. Got it.
I'm interested, this isn't a motion or anything, but just for discussion. You know, should we be recommending that they consider other options instead of just one category? So maybe they consider the top of each category for funding and be your recommendation is that to the top of that category. So that it's not just smart cities that could repair, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's such a specific recommendation that I feel like if we just ask them to prioritize the funding, we'll figure out the how. If they listen to us, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like that level of detail is just. That's up to them.
So in general, the motion is just that really, as you stated, we believe any transit project should be of highest priority, generally speaking. I mean, and this is the one we've got in the hopper, but I mean,
that project.
but I mean, it's in effect a statement that in support of transit funding by this panel. And that it be prioritized more.
It was for that specific project, yeah.
So it's not suggesting which other project should be.
No, it's just specific to that project,
Any other discussion?
because that project has had the most traction for the longest time and been through multiple concepts and design phases already. And it's just a matter of getting it funded. Is that right? I mean, would you like, would you like to add anything else on context about why Hart wants to fund that transit project as opposed to any other transit project?
All of Hart's, top priorities are on there, the heavy maintenance and the buses are the top those. BRT is the next one. That BRT is not just, not just buses, it's long term. I mean, it could be a streetcar later, it could be other things, so, but it's about getting the corridor, get it constructed, get it funded now. And, we have a preliminary concept design on how to get it that far, it just has to move forward, has to be funded.
So, because Hart also has 10, 11, and 12 on here too, which are the, vehicle replacements, midlife overhauls, Hart heavy maintenance facility, plus stock capital improvements. Where would you rank that compared to this other project?
Well, kind of like what Tim said, we've been so grossly underfunded for so long that everything's on fire, right?
So the reason I bring it up is just because then they could take that and put that above those.
Yeah, I would not want to see that, but I would want to see some kind, because the heavy maintenance, let's talk about heavy maintenance. Heavy maintenance facility is $150 million building. If you look on the list, it's only $4 million that we're getting from this pot. So that's not going to get it done, but it does get funded, the pot to eventually get there. So same thing with bus stops. Bus stops is maybe a $90 million endeavor. $11 million to chip away at that and show some progress.
Right, so the TPO does fund things, but not at the full amount.
Not the full amount, and so the ask is usually big. You ask big and get pieces of it. So like you said, if you get $60 million and you offer us 30, yeah, I'm gonna do some work up to 30.
No, I'm gonna ask you to state the motion. But, I'd be more comfortable with it maintained, supported, moving to the top of that category in the project instead of motion that we did open to going to the very top of the list. Possibly. Eating the funds of other worthy projects.
Right. Yeah, and
Restate your motion.
You could amend your motion and get a second on that. Right.
okay,
Or
yeah, I can do that. Is that kind of the direction everyone wants to go with it?
I'll just say that as agency staff, with one of my agency's projects being leapfrogged in this, I'm going to choose to abstain from the vote if that's the way it is. I won't oppose it, but I don't feel comfortable doing that on behalf, as a representative of the county.
Okay, that go the same for you, Abigail?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I guess as we as the city of Tampa, perhaps, I mean, I was speaking freely as my own self. The opinions I share are not the opinions of the city, so I feel like that's a statement as well. But yeah, I will rephrase the motion such that I will recommend to the TPO board that we elevate the BRT project from downtown Tampa to USF to the top of the major projects bucket for TPO funding.
Okay, the second.
the second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, let's have the vote.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Hi, for, pardon me, for recording purposes. Mr. Horst, would you please repeat your motion one more time?
I made a motion that we should increase the priority. Did you write it down? Ben wrote motion to elevate the Tampa to USF arterial BRT project to the top of the major projects category for TPO funding. Ben. Word salad.
Did you get that, Gavin? Dan under yes. Second.
Yes, I got it. And who was the second on that?
Dan Rodriguez.
Thank you. And Mr. Rodriguez, did you second Tim's original motion as well?
I did.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no more discussion. Let's have the vote. I'm not expecting any unanimous votes, so we'll do the show of hands for the first round. So, all those in favor, please raise your hand. So it's count 7, 4, and any opposed? So the motion passes. There's still a request to approve the priority list.
How many oppositions were there to that vote, please?
There were 9.
There were
And
two
were there
abstentions.
I'm sorry, 0 abstentions?
Now,
Two abstentions, 0 opposed,
0 opposed, how many abstention?
2.
Thank you.
Okay, so we has to make a motion that there is a request for a motion to recommend the priority list.
I will motion to recommend the TPO priority list as amended by him.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, yep.
We're,
And
we're, so what we are doing now is we're voting on recommending that, but with that amendment. Okay,
yes,
got it.
do we need to do that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Like, obviously, that would be the case since we passed the motion saying that.
Because the priority list hasn't actually changed based on our motion. Still.
We didn't,
priority list
yeah.
As is, so I think. Yeah.
If I can offer, typically the CAC will do just what you did and then make a recommendation on the list as long as it follows those other actions. So. Gail.
But the recommendation is with the amendment or just plain?
So would you create a separate motion to say you should reorder your priorities of those 5 categories to this?
So how I understood your motion was that the committee agreed to recommend to the TPO board to move out of their arterial BRT. There's still the action I think needs to be taken to the whole list or is recommended the list. As typically as the second motion.
But is your recommendation that second motion incorporate the amendment? Because otherwise we're voting for things that are contradictory.
Yeah. I think either way is fine, but the board will hear it, so whichever your preference is.
So the motion that was made was included Tim's amendment that we're recommending the list. And there was a second for that motion. So is there any discussion on that motion?
This is inclusive of the amendment.
That's how it was.
Well, I will have to abstain again, but it's not gonna affect the outcome, but.
Yeah. Okay, so is there any other discussion? The motion is okay, so let's do another show of hands vote. So all those in favor of the motion, please put your hand. Okay, so it's 7-4. Any opposed? None opposed, so 2 abstain. All right, so motion passes. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Elizabeth, for making that very clear and helpful and all the information you provided. I think that was, yeah, much more clear breaking it out that way rather than before it all being jammed in one. It was kind of a lot to swallow. Just to forget the breaking out.
I'll also just offer a comment and I defer to the staff, which is very experienced at doing this. And I assume you learn every year and try and make it better.
Every year.
Right, so, and I've observed this in my couple years at the TPO, that there are lots of what I just kind of consider requests for motions that are generally just made and off. So I actually appreciate this discussion, but I think if we want to solicit feedback from committees, maybe there's another way to do it. And I'm sure there's discussions happening in the TPO, but this, to me, kind of exemplifies what I've seen at this committee is that there's kind of these rubber stamps, if you will, right? And to me, my observation has been, our goal is to make this a pleasurable place to bicycle and walk, and that's it. Now, I understand that the TPO has to make compromises between other modes of travel, but this body does not. And so I don't see how, if you're going asking for the same motion and there hasn't been input, other than the agencies that are represented here, then it's, I don't know, not that it's a waste of time, I guess, is kind of how I see it, so.
So maybe I can offer, so for the Citizens Advisory Committee, we will bring this in May. I've actually just had another workshop with them 2 weeks ago. The TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, we just bring it to them. One other, so it's scalable. Like if you wanted to see this next year, an extra time, 2 extra times, I'm more than happy to accommodate.
Okay. Yeah, maybe, I mean, specifically on how we, right, because I understand it's the TPO's responsibility to allocate funds across different projects, but I would think that this body would be interested in working with the priorities, say, of Vision Zero or some of the other ones that are clearly relevant. And to some degree, I think the Smart Cities falls in that too. I don't know enough about the details of the projects, but maybe if we could be engaged earlier, learn about what these applications are, then we'd have more informed discussion here. That's what I offer. But thank you. I don't want to.
So maybe the thing I can do is, when we get to maybe January, February next year, I can work with Ben, work with the chair, and then we can, if you guys want to decide on what the topics are, if you want to adjust the priority list, and we are here to make sure that you all feel informed. So
Yeah.
I'll make a note to myself for next spring that we have some early engagement.
Yeah. No, I do. Because honestly, I don't imagine if we were more informed of how you came up with these rankings, you probably have a better appreciation for them and might unanimously agree. You know what I mean? I think it's that lack of understanding of what the variables are here. And then that's just asking us to approve everything you've done, which I know you're doing great work. But I don't know, am I looking out for fellow cyclists? I don't know. If I wasn't, that should have been shame on me. So I don't know that we always have the information to make these decisions.
No, I appreciate that feedback. So you'll definitely
Yeah.
be hearing from me, Ben, early in 2026.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. If we're going to now move on to our workshop. So, Dan.
Just on that to add a comment, I do think that, the influence and effect of this board here in this meeting is, in a sense, more pointless if it's just to serve as a rubber stamp for the existing decisions, right? But if we're able to unify our voice and pass a motion, then to me that's something that, can be forwarded to the TPO board and is actually effective advocacy for, the interests of this board. So I feel like that's, definitely the direction we want to go.
Yeah.
That and getting earlier engagement would help make those, I will say, recommendations more informed and thoughtful on our end. So I think that's a great idea for the future.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, so as you all might remember, we have our July workshop coming up on the 23rd, Wednesday, the 23rd of July. It'll be at the same time as usual, 5:30 p.m. At our last meeting, we talked a little bit about potential focus topics. I think I had one idea of riding a hard bus. There were also discussions about coming up with a branding and outreach plan for BPAC so that the committee can have a more visible public presence. And also the idea of revisiting our top 10 list that we approved a couple of years ago to see if looking to possible advocacy campaigns of sorts or advocacy work there. And just revisit the status of all those 10 locations. Does anyone have other ideas or thoughts?
Yeah, I like those ideas. It's a manageable analysis to do a workshop. I think they're good topics that are better done informally. Obviously, something like a workshop is.
Yeah, so that would be sort of a division of, outreach plan could be the first half and then top 10 review could be the second. Okay, so that's one decision to make. Another one is where to meet. If we can do it anywhere, I think the rules, don't quote me on this, are that it needs to be open to the public, ADA accessible, and we need to have minutes released of some sort. But besides that, we can do it here, or if anybody else has ideas, they're welcome to float them.
Yeah, any other ideas for where, I mean, the things come to mind, right? Is it just some change of scenery people want, or are there better locations that are more accessible?
And pizza vendors, it's
I had at one time suggested MR Collective because I work out of there, but I think being an evening meeting, that'll create challenges there. So just because they would have to keep staffing to accommodate us. But I don't know if there's other places. There was, I think the default will be here unless somebody proposes one. Everyone.
But I think your collective will need that be able to interact and all that, which limits some of the space. So I guess I would say default here is.
And everyone can. Okay, good with topics, other things you want to discuss. Okay. So.
Question I have, are we looking for new locations? She sent out the previous top 10. How do we want to handle that? Or should we bring a couple ourselves?
And thought about that. I assume your recommendation, I think the top 10 lists that we did last year, right?
right. I was going with the idea of going through all of the whole list as it was that year and give all of you updates on each of them to see where things stand. But we could also modify the list for certain. Yeah, we can certainly do that as well.
Would you mind setting out the list just so we have a fresh list? And then, I mean, ultimately, where I would love to go this Lisbeth thing, I would love for us to be putting a project together that then we're voting on it to be a priority. Like, that's where I would love to take this eventually.
Yes.
But so taking that and kind of refreshing it and seeing next steps for it, I like that as well. So if you don't mind setting that out and then take a look at it and see if there's anything else that I do on something.
Yeah, and Ben, I think you just said at the workshop, you're planning to prepare status updates for each of them. So some of them may already be in the TDO, as I don't know.
Exactly.
Or have been funded some other ways. Right. Ben, were you looking for a motion to approve the agenda and location?
I guess that works. Yeah, makes sense.
Yes, since we're not changing the location doesn't necessarily need to be. But yeah, does anyone want to make a motion supporting the proposed agenda? All right. So Elaine Watson, John Vicky second. And you want me to state the motion or do you want?
Well, move to accept the agenda for the workshop as stated in front of you. And outreach will be followed by the top 10 list review.
Second, okay, any discussion? But all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion passes unanimously. All right, thanks, Matt. Status reports, so detailed safety insights. Comment before we share.
Yes, good evening, BPAC. I'm Connor Travis McDonald, Chief of Staff. I'm here to present detailed safety insights and a little bit of a background on where this came from. I presented maybe January, February on the performance measures, which are required by the POs. And the first category of performance measures is safety, so we report on the fatalities and we set targets there. When we presented to the board in January, they requested more information on some other crash trends. So we did provide that, and they wanted this before the TIP approval so they could kind of be influenced by this information. So some of the things they requested were crash trends as it relates to law enforcement, crash trends related to the density of the environment, some geographic analysis, including identification of some problematic intersections, day of the week and time of the day, impaired driving, and overall rate of crashes. So the first one, as I mentioned, is as it relates to law enforcement. So more background on this, the TPO staff, we meet with the Hillsborough Community Traffic Safety Team as part of the DOT. We've been meeting with them since 1991 with efforts on education and enforcement campaigns. We also have some other ongoing efforts. We recently reviewed the standardized crash form, and we have access to crash reports and citation data. So some information on the actual data that you can see. Citations, this is speeding citations and fatal or serious injury crashes. They were more or less steady from 2020 to 2023, but in 2024, we did see that reduction, as you might remember, in fatal and serious injury crashes, and there was an increase in speeding citations in 2020. So located with more crashes and citations, this analysis is done by like one, it's not square, but it's actual hexagon. So one area, 1 mile area, and there's about 1,300 miles in these areas in Hillsborough. So these numbers seem a little low, but that's because it's a small area. So speed related fatal or serious injury crashes. There were 3 in Ruskin near East Shell Point Road and Interchange Street. So there were 3 fatal or serious injury crashes and 1 citation. This was speed related crashes, and then another is US 301 at Bonita Drive. There were 2 crashes and 1 citation. Overall, there were 411 from 2020 to 2024. 36,000 citations, speeding citations. A little bit more on this, with the location of crashes and speeding citations is most similar. So where there are crashing and speeding citations, Boy Scout Boulevard, West Shore Boulevard, Nebraska Avenue, and Fowler Avenue, Dale Mabry Highway between Spruce and Columbus. And another location where they're at least similar, so where there's more crashes than citations, is I-4 near 15th Street. So as these crashes relate to the density of the environment, we use FDOT's context classification. You may or may not be familiar with this, but the left side would be more natural environment, and then kind of related to density following to the urban center and urban core on the right side. I also added limited access facilities on the far right. So the crashes per mile kind of tells a story where urban general has the highest rate. So what this explains is the fatal and serious injury crashes near those context class roadways for urban general divided by the amount of miles of that road. But the percent of total crashes is 42% in suburban commercial, and the highest number also in fatalities with 312. And the last row are examples of these context classes, so you have an idea. This is not necessarily where the crashes are, just kind of common examples so you know what the roadway would be like. So for example, Fletcher Avenue on suburban commercial, that may not be where all the crashes are, a lot of the crashes are happening, just an idea of what suburban commercial. So some locales, this is use signal for network screening. to identify some top crash areas. So a further analysis could be done and will likely be done later this year with team staff. But some of the high crash areas important to this network screening are Old Big Bend Road, I-275, Amona Road, and Lincoln Road. Some other crash trends as requested by the board. Day of the week, it's somewhat steady with Friday being the highest at 17%. Time of day is most high around 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. These are fatal and serious injury. Just a reminder, fatal and serious injury crashes from 2020 to 2020. The percent of crashes related to impairments or drug or alcohol related. We saw the highest number in 2021 at 2.6% and a decrease to 2024 at 1.7%. Vehicle miles traveled, many of you may be familiar with this. We did, obviously, the decrease in 2020 is related to COVID-19 pandemic, and the increase all the way up to 2024, where we've seen the highest. And I'll kind of explain why this is relevant. The rate of crashes that are fatal saw an increase in 2021 and a decrease towards 2024, but not quite at 2018. But comparing those, and that's the purpose of showing the VMT, is that as they, combining them so visually so you can see them together, 2020 saw the lowest VMT, 2021 kind of lower as well, but we saw a higher rate of fatal crashes. So I'll let you make your own inferences, but you can kind of see that as VMT increases, fatal and serious injury crashes decrease. So finally, some of the TPO efforts that we do to increase safety and reduce those numbers that we see. The staff and the board continue to program and develop studies and plans, one including a before and after infrastructure implementation analysis. And I think the county is also working on something similar. We also have a high injury network identification, which I believe we'll be working on later this year, and border studies. One currently I think is Manhattan. And as you heard before from Elizabeth, we also have safety projects in the LRSOP, and then through the list of priority projects into the transportation. So with that, I'll take any comments, questions, or further inquiries that I can help you answer if you're curious.
So, Brenton Motor, USF Cutter, when you looked at context classification, did you also break these down by ownership of the road?
So the context classification, because those are that specific context class shapefile, like this, that map is just FDOT roads. So that's just specific to state roads. But we can see ownership as well. Okay.
Any other questions? Yep. Can you go back a bit? This is great stuff. I was excited when I saw it at the board meeting, and there's a lot of cool stuff in here. So thanks for doing this. Yes, please keep going, please.
Okay.
So the first thing is you were comparing the enforcement versus crashes.
Yes.
Okay, so this one, you just kind of, I won't say arbitrarily, but sort of intuitively said, okay, you compare fatal or serious crashes per square mile to citations per square mile. And in these two locations stood out because on those measures, the number of crashes of that type is higher than citations, whereas the overall trend is the reverse, that citations exceed crashes by a lot. So these places, I guess, perhaps could be under enforced in the interest of safety. Is that a possible inference from that? Not saying it's a conclusive finding, but it's a possible one. And these two are the areas that stood out the most in that regard.
That'll be the inference I would take away. And so a little more, so a little more context. because I used the hotspot analysis and GIS, so it wasn't quite arbitrary, but I understand what you mean.
Right.
Um,
Where did you get like citations per square mile as a unit to compare? Have you seen that done somewhere else? Or?
I.
I like it.
But you came up with it with the goal of identifying places that are either under-enforced that are potentially candidates for improved enforcement or improved treatments that might improve safety.
Yeah.
And so these are really the only ones that were.
So there are a few more that are like the exact same, or there's always going to be more citations. So I'm sure there's different ratios, but these were the highest.
Because like looking at that overall ratio, that's crazy. That's what 10. That's almost 100 go on in the other direction. Yeah, I mean, to be 10%, yeah, or 10, so it's 10%. Or 10 to 9, whatever that is.
It's a decimal points in there.
So a big one note on that is, so that 411 is only ones in which the box is checked for speed.
Or so speed related, okay.
Yeah.
But that's the same is true for the 3 and the 2.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
So I mean, those are, the blue line is apples to the gray line in both cases.
Yeah.
But, so I mean,
But that's just
really
1%, not 10%.
yeah, so it's 100 to 1. The ratio is about 100 to 1. But in these two places, they're 1 to 3 in the opposite, or 3 to 1 in the opposite. Well, one is 3 to 1 and one is 2 to 1 in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
That's pretty severe switch. And there's probably a bunch of them that are, like you say, closer to 1 to 1. And some places that are hundreds to 0 or whatever, but that's still just, that's really, it's an interesting analysis that I never would have thought, right? Okay, and then on the next one, there's a similar, this one on the right, where you say they're the least similar, more crashes than citations. How is that different than what's on the previous slide?
It's similar.
Okay.
I should have added more, but these were the highest, and this was just more, like you were mentioning, the ratio.
Okay, so these are ones that would be closer to the
Right.
slightly off 1 to 1, but not to this degree. Okay, that's, I was just confused if there was something really different between the two. And then on the context class one. So those are crashes per mile. That's just roadway mile. That's not BMT, something. The mile there is just the lane miles or center line miles. Okay. So I was just trying to put that onto kind of exposure in some of those ones where the suburban commercial is so much out of whack with everything else. And then the urban general per mile seems high, but everything else is relatively low. I mean, the percent and the fatalities are relatively low compared to the suburban commercial, but that's because you've got more roads, more densely packed. And that may or may not translate to the number of cars being down all these roads at the same time. Okay, and then as someone who works for the county.
That would also be higher speeds too. Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the obvious, but he just pointed out, like, when listening this time, I heard him, it struck me that he pointed out that crashes per mile was high in urban general, relatively, and urban center. But I was really clear about those miles are roadway miles, not necessarily vehicle miles traveled. So it's a spatial problem, not an exposure problem in the same way. And then, but just as someone who works in unincorporated county more than not, the fact that the rural fatalities are completely out of whack with the percent crashes, and also the suburban general are completely out of whack on the, well, maybe not completely out of whack with the 42%. But the 55.4 is crazy. You're gonna get killed if you're in a crash in a rural area. And there's a really good chance you're gonna get killed if you're in a crash in a suburban. And that was 4 years of data.
5 years. It's confusing because 2020 counts as
And
one.
you've got total, but that total crashes is serious and fatals, or
I think
is
that
it all crashes of any kind?
I believe this is fatal crashes over 5 years. So a lot of it is
This middle one.
access.
This is fatalities, but is this all crashes of any kind or fatals and serious injuries?
1% of total crashes. I think it's, I have to double check, I'm sorry, I don't remember, and I believe it's percent of total fatal crashes. That's what I would have done, or should have done at least.
The fatal crashes per mile there as well for the top. row.
Yes, fatal crashes.
Okay. Well, you sent me the things. I'm wrestling with doing a similar analysis and the idea of getting a data set which has all crashes. It's like you're dealing in the hundreds of thousands of records. So I have 6 things. Okay, thanks. I'll follow up on some of the details.
And if I may, John brought up a good point about this related crashes. So like you mentioned, these are marked speed related, so it may be more than that, or I mean, could be more than that. Because this is from the law enforcement records. So if they mark it speed related, then it would show up here. If they don't mark it for whatever reason, it's not gonna show.
So would it be marked other things too? Like speed and impairment?
Right.
But that would, if the officer shows up after they've got to deduce that speed was a factor for some conclusion or thing. Not a witness. There are many that may not be reported.
It's usually under reported.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to, old business and new business. Let's start, since we didn't have a forum when we did, approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the April meeting minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Right?
Approve the April meeting minutes.
Right? Got a second? I feel sorry. Yes. Okay, second. Go for us.
Everyone's gonna abstain on it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes passed, or approved unanimously. And then let's move on to, noting we've got 20 minutes left. So, and 3, set of, well, I guess, sort of just not, we don't call them sets, they're updates from Tim and Chris. So, do you have anything to report? Project staff, city of Tampa, project staff.
There's gonna be a public hearing for Twig Street coming up soon. As far as whether bicycle lanes, should be installed on it with this upcoming project, or whether just wider pedestrian space are the 2 things being discussed.
How do you announce those public hearings?
Just, is that the one that's on the 11th?
I believe it is on the 11th.
Yeah, it's the same time as the CPO board meeting on with the tip hearing.
Okay.
They'll have to choose what they're passionate about.
Yeah, I believe it's at like the fire station.
Yeah.
You heard about it?
Yeah, Karen Kress sent it to her email list of downtown people. So that's
Yeah.
right. I saw it today and I was fixing my calendar to make sure I was watching that board meeting.
Right.
Can you get
Yeah,
that
basically,
announcement to Ben to distribute to ownership?
yeah, that'd be very important to,
Because I mean, I think I follow the city on social media, but I haven't seen it.
the city's transportation plan calls for bicycle lanes, but doing that while also accommodating traffic will mean the loss of parallel parking on some sections. So, you know, it's a big decision to get input on. So, yeah, you'll learn more about it in the meeting, but yeah.
Seems like an easy decision. We have excess parking. Controversial, but okay, yeah, if you can get the announcement.
Okay.
That's,
Yeah.
I'll look forward to it.
Send it over to Ben, so that way we can inform all you guys, encourage you to come out.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
No, I think that's.
Okay, thanks. Chris, any updates on the county projects?
Yeah, a few. I told you guys before that we're getting counters, provided by DOT on the few county trail locations, and the one at Lake Fern apparently is up and running. And the others are all in various stages of approval, but we believe they're going forward. The bridges on the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, which were, one was just very old and had to be replaced, and another was damaged in the storm. Those are both still on target to be reopened by July 1st. There's rumors they could come sooner, but nobody's gonna commit to anything. The big inspections are coming next week to kind of solidify that schedule, but that's encouraging. There's some other repairs between Sheldon and Wyandotte on the trail that are gonna take longer. That we don't have specific timelines on it yet, but when the bridges are fixed, at least the section between Wyandotte and Gardner should be reopened, so that should be exciting. Other things, the Upper Tampa Bay Trail design project is underway, and schedule is that there would be 60% planned sometime in the fall and a public involvement thereafter. I know that's something that a lot of people in the community are very interested in. And there is a public meeting on the 17th of June, and Ben, I'll get you this info. There's a widening and roundabout project along Van Dyke Road, which includes a trail alongside it. And that's in wrapping up PD&E and beginning design, but there's a public meeting on the PD&E, and that will be an important connection from the trail, from the Upper Tampa Bay Trail over to Lake Park and sort of the Northdale area. So I'll share that info to get anything.
So you're gonna give us a presentation on the count soon?
I'm gonna give it I can maybe share it, but I won't be here next month. But I haven't looked at any of the data from the counters that DOT has installed. We did our own counts as part of our traffic counts last year, and I'm going to present some of those results at the Greenways Committee on the 18th of June. But I'll share the slides. Ben should be there. Sally will be there. So I can then share that there too.
So as far as the Safe Streets for All grant, we are in the design phase for 99% of the projects. That's good. And the first projects that are gonna be completing design and constructed is the city's resurfacing projects. So that's Armenia.
Columbus in construction.
Well, isn't Armenia, I got the other one. Yeah, the resurfacing that's in the Safe Streets for All. Those are gonna be the first to be constructed out of the 22 projects.
Yeah, we're waiting for that Armenia project. We did a bike lane down there, greatly add to the connectivity of it. So, south of Kennedy, our project. So.
Thanks. And Ben, did you want to give an update on the Central, Plant City Central connections?
Absolutely, yeah, that's one thing. I also just wanted to pass out these flyers, particularly that I almost forgot to do. It's for the comprehensive plan update. Tampa. Very much.
Yeah.
And also, the Plant City Central Provincial Study. I will not long delay you, but we do have a few updates.
That's good. Chasing one.
Okay, so we had our second stakeholder meeting for the Plant City Central Connection study last week. I'd say it was successful. The long story short is that based on public input and our own evaluations, we are narrowing down the list of alternative alignments to try to connect Plant City into the statewide trail network. And let's see. Yeah, so we have about 4 possible routes at this point, one along Sam Allen Road, another one on US 92, one headed northward along Paul Buchanan Highway, and then an eastward option to Lakeland and Polk County. I know it's late, so I won't drag you all through a full recap of the whole presentation, but we have everything uploaded on our website. You can see the alignments. That would be under stakeholder meeting number 2. And we're going to be discussing it at several different meetings in the coming months. We have a Tri-County BPAC meeting this June, and I'm going to give a full presentation on the study's progress there. That would be a good chance to provide any comments on it you might like, as well as here, of course. And we have a final stakeholder meeting that's going to be open to the whole public. It's going to be an in-person location this time around. Probably in early July. We will keep you posted on the time and location. And yeah, so then we will bring the final recommendations to all the committees, including BPAC, in August and September. And then the board will consider it for possible approval on the 10th.
So there's gonna be one more vote, so to speak, where there's 3 options to choose from instead of 7.
We have, I think, 4 alignments that we have started to narrow it down to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Between the 4.
Yeah, you might not necessarily say just one. We might rank them by most feasible. You might recommend choosing between one of the 2. We haven't decided exactly yet, but we have just focused in the alternatives. See, and I can pull those out if anyone wants to see. And this decision was also, of course, based on the survey that you all filled out. Thanks again for taking the time to do that. Yes, so just to recap the findings, we are down to west option 1 in the north here. West option 2, that's the one to US 92, the one out north of Sam Allen. Then north option 1 to right to Zephyr Hills, and then an eastward option towards Lakeland. Right, so I will keep you all posted on that. Thanks again.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so the Tri-County BPAC is before our next meeting, and it's virtual only, right?
That's right, all virtual, no more great.
Okay. It says on the Hillsborough hosting, but that just means we host the county.
Yes,
The TCO hosts the meeting.
yes.
All right. Okay, is there any other new business? Right. Oh, sorry, Sophia.
I just wanted to expand a little bit on, the handout that Ben gave, but the handout that Ben gave. So if you guys have been following, for the city of Tampa, they've been updating the comprehensive plan, the Tampa team specifically of the planning commission, staff. And the flyer you got is for, the next set of sections that are being updated, and list them all right here. Again, there's only one in-person and one virtual meeting, and this is to get public input on these sections. If you've been following, the future land use section, coastal management and housing sections were heard at city council last week. And there was a lot of robust discussion. And the council then voted to continue, the conversation, and hold another public hearing on August 28th. And that was with the intent to get more, public input, use the time between now and then to hold more public, meetings. And again, just get more community input. So those meetings haven't been scheduled, but those will be, and they'll be announced as they are scheduled. So again, just wanted to keep everybody informed that there is some more public input opportunities coming up over the summer, that we give interest to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other new business?
So I guess I'd like to announce that, this would be my last. My wife is due with a child in like 3 weeks, so I'm gonna be all hands on deck to help her out and support her and our family. So yeah, it's been a pleasure serving with you guys all these years. But you know, who knows what the future holds? Maybe I'll be back here, but it's kind of too soon to make that decision or whatnot. But I'm sure I'll continue to see many of you guys around.
You've asked the time that somebody else is serving.
We're working on it, yeah. Okay, we're talking about it, so we'll.
I think John Marsh is the official alternate, right? For your position, but I don't know how that stands with your role as officer, so, yeah.
Yeah, I see it's standard is alternate, but you should look around for placement.
Okay, yeah, I'll
Well, and then at the next meeting, we can consider
Yeah,
filling the vacancy in the office.
yeah, so Ben and I have a planning call on Monday, and we'll make sure that's what.
Oh, so good job again.
Well, me too. No, I know, it was, yeah, I don't think there'll be any competition. But yeah, just so everyone knows that we either, the city hopefully replaces your position. And then there'll be whether it's, John takes over as vice chair and we elect a new officer, or guy, we just gotta get bylaws, I don't think they say.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be controversial. I would appreciate everyone who.
Yeah, I'll check that. I would
yeah.
imagine.
There's no automatic succession.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you for your contributions, especially, every year, last year, chair, especially the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thanks again.
And good luck with your growing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if that's it, then will call meeting adjourned. All right.